Good afternoon. Welcome back to Amtalk Dialogues Session 4. We are truly honored to have amongst us today a living legend, and it's a privilege for me to interview him and to have a fireside chat with Shashiketan Shetty. The subject: how an entrepreneur's ingenuity built the first global logistics company. Tell us a little bit in a very short brief, because we have loads of questions for you on your starting of your journey from Bangalore and how you landed up in Mumbai in shipping.
Obviously, I am not even from Mangalore. I'm 5 kilometers further down south of Mangalore, a place called Bantwal, where I did my graduation, and I belong to a family which was into business. And as I was growing up, unfortunately, the business didn't do well, and a lot of responsibilities fell on my shoulder. Probably I would never have come to Mumbai if our business were to do well. Maybe I would have gone into politics, because a lot of Bunt members are in politics, and obviously I couldn't become a doctor because a lot of our fraternity also into doctors and lawyers. So anyway, that didn't happen for me. So I came to Mumbai looking for a job. One of my relatives gave me a job in a shipping industry, shipping agency company called Sangam Shipping, which was owned by DC Cooper, and subsequently worked for Modal Transport for a brief while, for 1.5 years. I learned a lot of shipping in that company. And then I moved on to Patwalk for 2 years, no, actually 1 year. Then I really felt, although Patwalk is a great brand name, but the diversity of shipping I was in ITTS was not available in Patwalk, being a very structured organization. So I ended up in an operations role, and I felt like fish out of water. And after Patwalk work, I was still very young. I was only 24. So there was no another job for me to take up. So I decided to start my transportation business in the port of Mumbai. And 10 years I ran the transportation business, handling ships, handling containers, handling project cargo, learned the ropes, made some good money. And bought my house in Bandra West, a place called Rizvi Complex. Got married to my lovely wife, Aarti. That was in 1988. And 1988. So everything came through this job, and I just fell in love with that. And more importantly than that is the shipping as a business itself. It is such a fascinating business. I got involved in tram business. I got involved in tanker business. I got involved in liner shipping. I got involved in livestock carriers. And of course freight forwarding. So that taught me a lot. Those 4 years taught me a lot, and the 10 years really grinded me. It was a very hard time of my life to make sure that the ends meet, and make sure that I started with 25,000 rupees capital. And that was a real struggle. And
you started with one forklift or something like that, or 2 forklifts, right?
I started with 1 forklift, and then we ended up with 4. Then, of course, within 2 years, and then that's when we started getting more business contracts from various shipping agencies. Were my main customers, particularly companies like Jem Bakshi, South India Corporation, M. Dinshaw. And those are the kind of companies where I did a lot of business with. Yeah.
Amazing. So from a person who didn't know what a ship looked like to today being the largest shipping group in India, it's a fantastic journey, encapsulating, I think, around 35 years or 40 years of your...
I came to Bombay in 78, so that's 22 plus 20, that's 42 years now, yeah.
40 years, wow. So quite fast, good run rate.
Yeah. Time just flew off.
You were a traditional transporter. Most people have big success stories in that story spectrum itself. But you went into something unheard of at that time, which is LCL consolidation.
Yeah.
Okay, it was small packages. It was a very alien and a new concept. And how did that come about? Because that was your big break, if I recall, from where you really shot up, and that was your turning point in your life for the big league. How would you...
Yeah, I don't want it to have a transportation as my aspiration to grow the business, because I love shipping, like I said, right? I always wanted to get back into shipping. I wanted to own ship one day. That was my ambition, but that story didn't last long because I realized very quickly ship owning is not an easy business, and that is not something for me. And I decided to move out of that because that is kind of impacting my other businesses. It's a very fascinating story. I had a friend called Dipankar Ghosh. We used to meet very often, and Dipankar Ghosh used to know a gentleman called David Phillips, who was the owner of Freight System. And Freight System wanted to come to India, and then they appointed a company called Zodiac Shipping as the agent, and there were 3 other partners, and that's how we got exposure to the LCL business. And that unfortunately company didn't last because there were differences with partners. And then what happened was David Phillips came and started his own company in India, and then got the opportunity to start AMI. AMI wanted to come to India. My dear friend Dinesh Lal, put me as one of the candidate for to be appointed as agent for AMI. AMI was not sure what they wanted. We thought that LCL, since we learned recently about the LCL business, we proposed why not we do LCL consolidation of India. And CMB at that time used to operate direct services to Europe and Africa. And thanks to them, they gave us FAK rates and gave us the opportunity to load LCL business because they were not very keen on loading LCL cargo. And slowly, in those days, the shipping lines are anyway wanting to move out of the LCL business because that is too much of headache for them. And the LCL shippers were not too happy. The freight forwarder friends of ours are not very happy. Whereas LCL, you need to fill a container. And you got to satisfy so many customers in one container. And this is a very specialized business. They're happening outside India. And AMI had offices in Africa and in Europe. So fortunately, we've been able to convince them, and they readily then accepted to work with us. That is how the whole LCL foray happened. And then when we did LCL, we also did a lot of full container load business together with that.
You bought over Equine, which was your partner and principal, with probably 5 times your revenue. It was unheard of at that time that anyone would buy their own principal. I mean, we were just always to be very blunt, a servant-master relationship traditionally between an agency and a principal. So how did that story happen?
When AMI started their own office in India, they offered me to start a joint venture with them where they would be majority shareholders. And I said, after a lot of thoughts, I said, it didn't make sense. It didn't appeal to me. And then I was looking for another network. And fortunately, found EQ. Again, good word by Vincent Hachey and Dinesh Lal. That's how the recommendation happened to EQ. Although EQ were known to India. And I went there and visited the EQ management a few times. They were very reluctant in the beginning because they already had a bad experience or not very happy experience. And they don't want to change the agent very easily unless they know us very well. And they did their due diligence. And then finally, after about 6 months or so, we had a 6 months period with AMI to depart. And EQ finally decided to work with us only from Bombay, although they had containers going to Chennai, Delhi, and Calcutta, and all these places. So they wanted to test, and we started the relationship. The relationship went very well because they were not getting any containers in return from India. They used to send containers here. So for us, it worked out beautifully because we were getting their containers, which AMI was not sending any, and we used to send our containers to EQ. So that relationship became very strong. And subsequently, after a couple of years, after a lot of follow-up, they decided to start working with us in Chennai and other places. So we became the exclusive agent in India. I knew one day EQ will come to India.
You mean set up their own office?
They'll set up their own office. So what I decided is that I proposed to them, after resetting up the company in about 20 odd locations, we thought that why not partner with them outside India, because they were growing, right? We used to ship a lot of containers to Dubai and also in Singapore and South Africa. So step by step, I formed a JV with them. In the process, I diverted their mind out of India so that they could focus on the other market. Because It's just not an agency relationship. They couldn't have found another agent also that easily in India. They could have taken our people and started some company that they were doing in the past with other agents. That could have been a possibility. So I kind of blocked that situation, and then did the joint venture. And the joint venture was in, like I said, Dubai, Singapore, and that worked out very well. And that brought us very close together. We also invested in a warehouse jointly in Dubai. Subsequently, EQ got diverted out of India, and they started looking at United States, Scandinavia, and few of the other European markets and all that. So while they were growing rapidly, they made some strategic error. Their checks and balances were not good. There was a lot of non-core businesses EQ was in, and unfortunately for them, their US business also did a lot of damage to their business. They lost a lot of money, and they brought in a private equity investor, and then they gave too many rights to the private equity investor. This is something the entire industry should know, that you got to be very careful when you work with private equity. They're very good. I work with private equity. They are good capital to have. All that is good, but you need to be careful, right? So EQ got into financial trouble, and they were looking for investors. They tried many places. They could not find anybody. And I went and told them, look, what is the amount of money that you need? So they asked for some $15 million or something like that to get the private equity out of the company. And fortunately, at that time, Indian market was very buoyant, and I was able to raise $12 million. And then I invested $15 million in EQ for 33% shares. That we need majority, at least 50-50, if not majority. I should have the rights, and I should also have a right to put my CFO there, because I knew that their CFO was not good enough, and that's why they got into trouble. And you also got to know what's going on in the company. So then 50%, I went into the company, realized the company has a far more value. I decided to go for 50%. After 1 year, we decided to go 100%, because then we went public, right? So we raised mostly private equity and public money to buy EQ. And it was a very structured deal. It was not buying one day. It was a very calculated, very thought through transaction.
Yes. But did you ever feel that, were you 100% sure that it will work out, or did you ever feel that, and was there a plan B?
The good thing is EQ, all the people were known to me, and the business was known to me, and they were handling our businesses at the destination, the origin. So I pretty much knew everybody there, right? So it was a great comfort in that sense. But definitely I had a lot of sleepless nights. I had a tremendous amount of stress initially to digest the acquisition, bring about so many changes. We had to shut down a lot of contracts that they had, non-core businesses, closed offices which are not loss-making. We also had a crisis in India. One of my relatives passed away, and some of our people left around the same time. We were implementing a ERP in India, so that unfortunately failed. But overall the company did well, and the acquisition. I put a lot of my time and effort in making sure that the acquisition worked out well, and that of course took us almost 10 years.
Yes,
and
yes.
On the back of that, then we acquired about another 8 companies. We acquired 3 companies in China. Our American partner, we acquired 2 companies in Rotterdam. Our full container load business globally. So there are a lot of acquisitions on the back of that. On the back of those acquisitions happened.
Any one more risk can you name before we move on to the next, which was like a make or break, or one of the biggest gambles you took?
It was not such a big risk. We started the container freight station in JNPT, as you know, and we went outside the CIDCO limit, because CIDCO was selling the land at 4 crores an acre, that too on lease. And I thought there is no sense paying that kind of a money. I did some survey and found that there were land just outside the CIDCO limit. There was one bridge that is connecting, and we made sure that the bridge was strong enough. And then first time when I went there, the entire place was full of paddy fields, and the Agri Sena was very active in that area. So that was a very risky land purchase, and then putting the whole structure without knowing what is the consequences after we develop the facility, right? From the local politicians and the local farmers and all that. So the idea of setting up a CFS, I must be very frank, was to move our LCL business there, because as all of you know, CWC at that time was quite a bit of a bad shape because of the labor issues and transportation issues, and our people had to spend sleepless nights there. So my heart was going out to my people, the way they were conditions under which they operated. That is why we built one of the world-class CFS and took all the risk, and that eventually we couldn't use it for LCL, but that was really a blessing in disguise. The ports were congested. The government of India asked all the ports to vacate containers and put them in the CFS. So CFS volume went through the roof just about the time when we were getting it ready, and we were used to store over 10,000-12,000 containers and no place to walk. So that was very, very profitable and very good business. And then rest is history. All of you know the whole town is now full of CFSs and empty yards. And that whole town is so much grateful to me every time I meet them, that I created a lot of fortune for them and jobs for them.
Can you name at least 2 setbacks which were really, really hard and which were do or die situation, and how you got out of that?
I don't think I ever had such a setback. Yes, there were some setbacks in my ship owning business. So, and also the container service that we started from Northern India to South India, South India to North India, the same lines as Shreyas operates Play. That didn't work out. So overall, it was not a big setback, nor it was a big financial impact also. Probably we're broken even, but the effort was far too much. So that's the reason I lost my heart in that business. And more we are looking into asset-light businesses and real estate-related business, warehouses and CFS and ICDs, other than EQ, NVO and contract logistics.
So what is your advice to entrepreneurs for the futuristic, in the future? What should our ideas should be for the next 5 to 10 years?
I can give you one advice. If you want to scale the business, it is very important to have not to mix asset heavy and asset light business, because asset heavy business has a very different DNA and a very different mindset and very different skill sets that are required. Okay, and asset light business is a service business, and it can be a professionalized business, and for both to happen, you need to have a scale. So I think our industry is very, very fragmented, and a lot of entrepreneurs in our business. So that's why it's probably difficult business for scaling up, unless the one follows the route what I adopted of acquisitions. And acquisitions has its own inherent risk, and it has its own inherent
it doesn't work for everyone. It doesn't work for everyone.
Yeah. So for sustainability standpoint, if you want to professionalize the business, then one obviously is a scale, and your business need to be always well capitalized, right? And the third thing obviously is you need to bring in technology into play, right? Whether it is your own technology or partner with some of the startup companies, work with startup companies as one of the investors. Early investors, if there is a strategic fit, is my recommendation. The other side, if you want to get into a capital-intensive business, then build a business where you allocate your time, because capital-intensive business, you always need entrepreneurs to be on the ground, managing day-to-day. You can't delegate it and make things work, because the environment is very difficult. Right? So that's the reason I have no deep interest into expanding a crane rental business, particularly project business and ship owning business. These are 2 setbacks that I had. if we were not to get into that business, probably we would have been far better capitalized today. In spite of the company doing well, we are not doing great in the capital market, which is one regret I have, because we have the mixture of so many things in one company, which capital market find it very hard to analyze. And to add to the complexity, we have global business, and none of the Indian analysts are tracking the global business. So that's why the valuation of Allcargo is pretty low comparatively.
Okay.
So that's my advice. So all the other businesses you can still manage through outsource model. Like say for example in Gati, we now have 5,000 vehicles, which we don't own any. We own few, but I told them to get rid of that as well.
Can you tell us more about the distinct honor of you being appointed as the president of NITI?
NITI came to me as a real big surprise. They had put me in the board about a year ago, but I didn't attend a single meeting because some reason, the lack of communication. And I had told them, look, I just don't want to be a member, because as a member I can contribute very little and I don't have the time for that. I had told them, if there is a leadership position, you let me know, then I may be interested, because I'm always interested to head an educational institution. And about a month ago, I got a letter from them that you've been nominated to receive our award for the highest business award that they have on a yearly basis. And I was very happy that I've been chosen for that. Ministry of Education has appointed me as the chairman, and I had no clue. So they didn't even ask me whether I'm interested. Anyway, so I was very thrilled, very delighted, and that's the kind of organization I wanted to head. The most important reason that why I'm excited about NITI is, number one, it is in Mumbai, and Mumbai doesn't have a IIM. Okay, although this organization sounds like a industrial engineering, but industrial engineering and management. Say that they do postgraduate diploma in engineering and also on the management side. They have three courses. 2 years MBA, 1 year not MBA, post graduation, and also 1 year executive education, and there's one more they have on environment and safety, right? And I felt all these three things are very relevant to the logistic and supply chain industry, particularly the industrial engineering, which teaches you very high degree of process improvement and process management, right? And which is very relevant to supply chain and logistic industry. And honestly, I'm telling you, I'm extremely thankful that I've been put there, because our industry can really benefit from this institution. I'm appealing to all of you through this forum that please go to the campus and start looking at hiring some of the brightest of the bright people. They churn out. They have a student strength of 1,200 altogether. They also do about 25 students are doing PhD. You could actually hire and get the campus and bring them into your organization for change management, productivity improvement, because that is the name of the game. If you are not able to reduce our transaction cost, if you are not able to onboard customers digitally, if you are not able to give a live track and trace and all the information that a customer need in the future, it will be very difficult for our business to grow, or I would say even to survive. Very important that you bring those kind of talent, and our industry is starved of talent. And this organization, of course, you are familiar with. There are many other organizations as well, but this is now ranked among the 12th in the country, and it's the only industrial engineering institution. And we are hoping that we will be able to scale this institution even better in the next 4 years of my chairmanship, along with many other improvements that I have in mind. We're in discussion.
Every time you have achieved significant success, you did not stop, you moved on. Have the new moves come by chance, or you had envisioned the same?
I think what keeps me going is two things, right? When you run a large organization, if you don't grow and you want to professionalize it, you got to have high quality people, and high quality people won't just come for salary, they come for growth, right? And if your organization doesn't grow, the company will have problem to manage it, right? That is point number one. And the point number two is, as the organization is professionalized, opportunities keep coming to you. And when you see some attractive opportunities, and it doesn't take away too much of my time or put me into difficulty, because I'm not doing my expansion through debt, except building these warehouses where the construction debt we have taken. But otherwise, I don't build business on debt. Use company money, or I use raise equity for growth. And I always maintain a very low debt equity ratio in the organization, which allows me to sleep well.
Even in your early days, sorry to interrupt, but even in your early days, you did not take debt on much debt?
Even early days. I did. It's not that I'm not taking debt. I just maintain a very healthy ratio.
Okay.
I have to have a very clear visibility of my cash. If I don't have that, I don't do debt. And the other very important thing I'm saying for the sake of the benefit of my experience to the others is that I always believed in proper checks and balances to make sure that our profit, no matter which part of the world, from which business it is earned, we have a special committee which looks and tallies every penny that we have earned and where is that money, and that money is counted, so that you don't end up. And we have other system where any profit that is shown, we want to see the money. Show me the money. That is the mantra in the company, right? Don't just show profit, show where the money is, right?
Correct. Cash is king.
And a strong internal audit system, high level of compliance. We don't like to, shortchange any law to the best of our abilities. These are some of the basic values that we follow in the organization.
What is All Cargo doing to attract young people in our industry?
Honestly speaking, there is a lot of interest for logistics and supply chain today than ever before, because people think the growth business, people think that logistics will be a game changer in the future in the country. First mile, last mile, mid-mile transportation, companies will continue to outsource their inventory management to third-party professional players. There's a lot of cargo will move into express transportation. In America, there is nothing like express and LTL. In America and Europe, everything is express. Okay, so in India, a small percentage of LTL business moves in express. There's a big market which can be converted into express. So there is and plus the economy is growing.
As a business owner, which are the three most important and crucial areas in the business which one should always focus on, no matter how big the business grows?
I think it's a very, very simple and easy answer. Customer is your purpose of you being in the business, is in the core of what you do. Your employees, obviously, and the third is your other stakeholders. That is your investors, your suppliers, whoever the other people who are your consultants. So all these, the purpose of you being there is for them in a way, right? Because of them you make money. Because of them you have a good job, a good profession, or whatever you call it. So customer has to be at the core of everything that you do, and then a lot of things start falling into place. So the other very important practice that I do is on empathy, right? I always try and put myself in the shoes of the other person to see how it feels. If you let down a customer, how I would feel in his place. Employee, too much of pressure on somebody, how he would feel, stuff like that. If you're empathetic, then most of the things starts falling into place.
Did you ever think you will get this big? Did you ever think you will reach where you are today?
Never. Never. Never.
What did you envisage it would turn out like?
In my wildest, not in my wildest imagination. I should be a liar if I say yes, but no, I never imagined. But I think I grabbed the opportunities that came along, as I said earlier, and I'm able to visualize the future. I have some amount of courage and conviction in me, something that if I believe strongly about it, I go after that. And I always take risk in, bringing in new people, put myself into a uncomfortable position with people challenge me, and some works out. Some people challenge you really good, some challenge you for the sake of it, and some don't last because of that, right? So these things happen.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Shashi. It's been an invigorating session. This is only part 1. Part 2 will be even better when we dwell on your personal side and your people who are with you from day 1. I would thank you very much once again.